In today's business world, change is the only constant, and mastering transformation is the ultimate key to success. Welcome to Shift and Thrive. I'm your host, Natalie Nathanson. Each week, we'll bring you conversations with CEOs who delve into how they successfully drove critical change in their organization. This show is sponsored by Magnitude Consulting, bringing you the thinking power of a growth consultancy and the getting it done power of a full-service B2B marketing agency. I have been really excited to speak with today's guest. She is a masterful business leader who has worked across multiple sectors, both locally and internationally. She's a leading member of Women Presidents Organization, where I first had the pleasure of meeting her. She's a dedicated advisor who is passionate about combining performance and humanity to transform businesses. She is a co-founder of the global consultancy Lockstep, and she's talking to me all the way from Cape Town, South Africa. Anne Hartslief, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Natalie. It's so wonderful to be here and to be having this really important conversation with you.
Thank you. Thank you. It's so great to have you. And Anne, I'd love to just dive right in and ask you, what do you think is the biggest misconception out there about successfully driving significant change in an organization?
Oh, goodness, that is a big question that could take up a lot of time. But if I had to think about that, one of the things that comes to me immediately is that transformation is never really done, and it's not merely a process. And business leaders have tried to over-process transformation, making it exactly the opposite of what it's meant to achieve. We talk a lot about being transactional versus transformational. And the biggest mistake I see is businesses, with all the massively good intentions that they have, over-engineer transformation into being transactional and actually not getting the results they really want and not knowing why it's not working. So I would say that is the biggest unconscious mistake that I see businesses make.
That's a really important one. I think that point about both, transactional versus transformational, over-engineering, those are really important points. And I think not always the things that come to mind first. So I'd love to unpack those a bit with you.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit maybe about what kind of over-engineering looks like?
Yeah, I definitely can. I think I just want to backtrack a little bit and say, I know you did ask the biggest, so I'm going to just throw in another one, and then I'm going to unpack what that over-engineering looks like. The other thing I see, which actually is and flows out of this, what I would call more transactional state, is businesses starting the transformation and then telling people that we are going on a transformational journey as opposed to inviting them in. So the over-engineering alongside that is all about, it's the process. They'll start with the process. And normally, and I keep on coming back to this because I don't think it's conscious. I don't think anyone sits there saying we don't want our transformation to succeed. Everybody really wants it to succeed. And so they'll think, there's a plan. We need to give people a plan, which is absolutely accurate. People do need a plan. But that first start of the over-processing comes up with, is the 5 steps we're going to do in order to transform. And already that's an over-engineered way. Because if you think about transformation, at the very heart of it happens through people. Businesses don't transform, people do, and therefore businesses transform. And so I think we get that mixed up by saying, actually, I want you, and I'm telling you that this is what we're going to be doing, and this is how. So please go and transform. And I've got a great plan. I'm acting as if I was the business, and it is. And it very, very rarely works, because for change, for transformation to really happen, the plan is actually the secondary thing. The first thing is inviting people onto this adventure, onto this journey with you, and then doing the meaning making with them, and then going into the plan, knowing that your plan will fail, because transformation is not a static, linear 5-step process. So staying open to those signals. I think the second part I want to talk about in the over-engineering is being fastidious about the plan and not being able to shift, not seeing the signals, not seeing the patterns, and not actually transforming yourself while you're trying to get the business to transform, or whoever the change agents are. And so the over engineering actually just becomes almost like a bit of a control and command dressed up as we're all transforming. So those would be the two starting things, I would say.
Yeah, that is so insightful. And I'm wondering, it sounds like it relates to the transactional versus transformational, especially thinking about how the individual leaders need to also transform. Is that what you're referring to when you talk about transactional versus transformational, or are there other kind of elements or layers to that?
There are so many layers to this if it's to be real. So I think we can see transformation almost through two lenses. And I call this like everyone wants success, but we forget about the sacredness within the success. So we start this with this, what does success look like and how are we going to do it? But the piece of it is for each leader to really be able to say, like, what is the soul of my business? And how do I put sacredness into getting to this transformations? I'm not sure if I'm 100% answering your question, but I think it really comes back to if a leader or a body of leaders haven't done their own personal work around transformation, there's a higher likelihood. I'm not saying there is zero chance, but there's a higher likelihood that this transformation is going to be much more transactional than it's really going to be transformational. Because as a human being, and I think soul in business is so important because it humanizes things, and it doesn't let us off the hook of the performance that we still need to achieve. So I'm always a bit wary of talking about soul and sacred success because a lot of people think, oh, that's the soft stuff. And actually, in order to have sacredness, we've got to get the hard stuff right, which are the performance measures and how we are measuring ourselves. But if we have not had any experience of what that feels like to really transform, and this doesn't need to be big steps, there can be small steps too. I think we also think about transformation as this big, massive thing. But if we haven't seen our business as our canvas and we are the person painting it, as leaders and how we shape it, the stickability is invariably harder.
Yeah, yeah, I can completely empathize with what you're saying from transformations that I've been a part of. I think that concept of the soul of the business is a really interesting one, and I can see what you're saying of how that may come across, but the importance of it in reality. Can you just explain that a little bit more for people that aren't comfortable or haven't been exposed to that concept? How do you define it, or how do you talk about that?
Thanks. I love that you're wanting to go there because I think and I include myself, for a long time, there were things that I just thought didn't belong in business. Like we would never talk about soul in business, or even sacredness in business would feel like a little bit odd. But through my own journey, and now I like to call it my own maturity, I've just seen a lot. I really believe these words do now belong in business more so than ever before. And just to say to anyone listening, not to be afraid of these kind of terms because they are really beautiful. And what I mean by them, I'm going to start not with soul. I'm going to start with the sacredness of success first. And so what I mean by that is if success is the one part of the component, which is you could wrap it in purpose, you could wrap it in vision, you could wrap it in mission, you could wrap it in goals, but that we are here to achieve something and to achieve something together is exactly what we're doing. That we need to have hard measures to that is absolutely right. That we need to be accountable for what we're doing is absolutely right. And that we need to have a strategy is absolutely right. The sacred part of it is the route to get into success. So it's not success at all costs. It's how do we actually put in what I call vitality into business? Because that feels very sacred. What is our process? How do we team together? And if we really can believe in the sacredness of our success and that which we want to preserve and do in a way that ignites us, then we've got to start looking at the soul of business. And really, all I mean by that is the real essence of what it is that we are building together. So if soul is a very difficult word for some people to integrate right now, you will get there eventually, because if you're really looking at essence, you're going to move to soul. But and if you're going to do it authentically, that is where you'll naturally move to. But for some, it's a big leap, and it was for me. So I have a lot of empathy and just consciousness around that. But if you really are going to look at the very true essence of your business, you can't do that without really taking a step back and what I call looking at the soul of your business, which is way beyond strategy. And in fact, I often say, like, what is the problem you genuinely want to solve? And where is the soul in that problem? Normally, that's a really great place to start. Like, if that problem had a soul, what would it want to be saying? Or if your business had a soul, what would it want to be saying to you as a business leader? And I think that's just an easier way just to humanize the work we're really doing.
I love that. I love that. It sounds like this, what is the problem you want to solve? That happens either at the very outset of the transformation, or ideally even pre-transformation, in how it might help to inform that. Is that how you think about that?
Yes, and I think it starts there. It's normally, so some people just fall into business and then later on they realize, gosh, this is something I am really passionate about, or I now see things in a new way. So that does happen. But normally for founders and CEOs, there is normally what I call a problem they're wanting to solve, or something that really fuels them, that they say this could just be better. And it does start there, but it doesn't end there, because this is not a one-time question. The world is moving. I always say, is your organization, is your business, or even your team learning faster than the rate of change? And if it is, that is a question that we've got to address over and over and over again, because transformation by its very nature, we are always transforming. The world is always transforming, which means we need to be hitting that question in many different ways all of the time. But a lot of people say, are you obsessed with your customer? And I say, well, you should be. But actually, there's something that comes right before that. And that is, are you obsessed with the problem that you're really trying to solve? And does that problem still exist in the way that you thought it did? Or has it shifted and changed? And then we say, if we really want to transform, let's get real about our stakeholders and all of our stakeholders, even to the point of when we have meetings that we talk about transformation, we have empty chairs that make up all of the stakeholders that just cannot be in the room. And now let's talk about transformation, and let's talk to the chair who represents a certain stakeholder. So they're always part of those conversations too. And I think that also really aids transformation in different kind of ways.
That makes me think about right at the early stages of a company. It's very clear, right? What's your reason for starting the company? What is the company's why? What is your why for approaching it and approaching it the way that you do? I think the piece that for me is a bit different in what you're sharing is that continues on throughout the life cycle of the company as the market changes, the world around us is changing, is continuing to keep that top of mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with that goes, I mean, I know I'm talking about this a lot around transformation isn't a once-off thing, but together with that why, or what is it that we're really wanting to solve, I think the same questions needs to be asked about the actual transformation process. Why aren't people adopting this in the way that we should? What is the problem we need to solve? Yeah. Why don't we have everybody rallied around this? What is the problem we need to solve? Yeah. As opposed to pushing a lot of people through a pipe. And I can imagine that for people that are doing big transformation projects, in fact, I know this to be true because I've worked in these environments, is that it just feels too hard to do it at scale and in a way that's really going to be fully embedded into the organization. I mean, gosh, people are exhausted before they even have started that. But the merit of doing it a little bit differently and breaking it down and being prepared to change in the transformation is where the real win really lies.
And I know it's probably easier said than done, but how do you think about doing that? How can you kind of guide CEOs or other leaders in supporting their team in that?
So there's this big concept within this around thinking systemically that I think is really important, because transformation actually affects a complete system. And when I'm talking about a system here, I'm talking about a person, I'm talking about a business, I'm talking about teams, I'm talking about anything that is the heartbeat behind making things happen within a business. But to think systemically is actually a very rare gift. So where we really start this whole process is with the CEO and a deep interrogation. Do you have the energy for this? Do you have the right people for this? Have you really interrogated this, and where does your ego sit in this transformation? Who have you tested this concept with? So we do a lot of really deep work with the CEO, with the founder, we've got lots of what we call chief transformation officers now that are at work. So we have those conversations, and they are really joyful and tough and necessary conversations to be having. Those conversations are, first of all, human to human. And then we look at the business, and we really ask some very real questions about the business, because I think it's very difficult for CEOs, founders, team leaders to see the business accurately when you're in the business. So we will normally hold the mirror after having spent some time in the business, if we have that kind of luxury. And we look at what we call the 7 levers of performance, because ultimately we want to solve a problem in order to perform better, in order to deliver something into the world. So we'll do a little bit of due diligence, but not in the normal kind of heavy process lifting way. At first, it is really just making sure that leadership is up for this journey. And if they're not, getting them ready to be up for this journey. And so that can look like teaming. It can look like getting really, really clear about mandates. It looks at what are the pitfalls in our team, because I can guarantee you, if you have a leadership team and they do not need to be perfect. In fact, I've never seen a perfect leadership team, and they don't need to be conflict avoidant. In fact, conflict is not a bad thing. But if they are a leadership team that are aligned around the future, and everyone often thinks they are aligned, but when you start picking it apart, everyone's seen it really differently. And if we can get that conversation and that work done, I would say that the rest is actually wonderful. Tough, challenging, but really wonderful. So that's where we would typically start. And then the second step is to actually invite people into this journey. So we don't go and say, hey guys, this is what we're definitely doing. We do go out and say, this is definitely what we feel called to doing. This is how we believe it's going to be translated into the business. Are you up for this? Do you want to come with this? And not in another kind of tick box, because that's what we do, right? We'll go in and we'll go, okay, we've got to have the all hands meeting, and it's the first meeting. And then this meeting is about telling them the change is happening. And we've just got to make it really fun for them and in a way that they're going to be excited. Tick, done, right. What's step 2? That I would say is the exact opposite. So when we're inviting people onto a journey, it's really going on what we call listening tours, really engaging like what I call the head, the heart, and the soul, like the deeper essence of us as humans, as leaders, and listening to how this makes people feel, what are they scared of, because then you can house that, and in your whole journey of change, because after that, some process stuff does need to happen. One, where do we start and where do we end? But if you haven't done that work up front, it just feels like another program or another engagement or another thing we're doing. So that would be the second thing. And then things need to start moving quickly. There are some principles for transformation that I think are really important when putting these things in place. Things like, if something is making you feel uncomfortable, come and talk to us. These are the people you can talk to. If there is a competency that you don't have, we want you to know it's okay, because that's what normally happens, right? People get afraid of change. I can't do this. I'm going to be stretched, and then they just pretend or they don't do a great job. So we want to give them the license to say, what do you need? And then the third thing, which I would say is probably even the more important thing, is to tell people that this is not going to be perfect. It's absolutely going to be messy. I don't have all the answers, and that's okay. But what we are committed to is spotting the patterns of this change, and then to do some of the human work alongside the actual, what I call building relevance, cracking performance, but actually also building the capability for everybody to actually lead through this change, because that's what transformation is, right? We're evolving. And to not forget that if we're leaving the human and how is the human evolving alongside this, well, then we are being transactional. We're just serving the business mission and hoping that our people will evolve with it. So we've got to do both and. So what I would say is that the role of the CEO or leadership has become far more nuanced than it ever used to be. So now we are asking people to really be in touch with their own change, their own triggers, their own defense mechanisms, their own shadow side, which is big work, to be a little bit more vulnerable about it. So to actually share with their people, like, what's coming up here for them, and then to teach people to do the same is vastly different from what we would have characterized a CEO even as little as 10 years ago, which would be set the strategy, set the vision, tell people what to do, and then get them to do it. I mean, that would be the old model, but the paradigm has shifted radically, and we are seeing that in business. People leaving businesses that they just feel like aren't serving them as a person, let alone their ambition.
I can completely see that. I think a lot of what you're talking about makes me think of just the importance of the cultural underpinnings of an organization. And maybe when you were talking about the essence too of what are you not willing to give up, what will not change as part of this transformation, and then also the eye on kind of where are you headed and what will the future look like.
Yeah. You just sparked something for me. One of the things that I have seen in business, you were saying, like, what are the, I don't know, it's not a misconception, but it's a mistake, is that I think we all fear, we want change and we want the transformation, and we can see it from a business rational sense, but that we know that the journey is a little bit tougher. And the mistake we often do make is saying nothing is going to change. We're going to do this process, and the upside's going to be so worth it that when you blink, you won't even realize that you have changed. And I love the point that you're making of saying, like, this is what's not going to change, but things are going to shift and change, and that's okay. Especially I mean, this is not exactly transformations, but where acquisitions happen, massive acquisitions, and they bring in two cultures together. I hear this over and over, someone standing up and going, don't worry, nothing's going to change. And I'm like, oh, mistake number one. So I thought I'd just throw that in to tell people what won't change and what, because that's the sacred part. This is not going to change. We value it so much.
Right.
But this piece really needs to shift, and this is why.
Yeah. And different people take in that message differently. So a conversation that I had with another CEO was, and you were talking about this a little bit with going on that listening tour,
Yeah.
was recognizing some employees are excited for this and they see the writing on the wall. And so they're being drawn to the transformation for similar reasons. And other times people are comfortable and they've been successful doing what they're doing. And so the change is scary. So needing to adapt to those different personas.
Totally. And what happens in that scenario is, as human beings, it's human nature. Those that see the change are excited about it. We join with them, right? Because they're sharing in our passion and our energy and our mission. And we often stop listening to the ones that find it harder. And that is a great mistake. Because actually in those areas there, if it's a good culture fit, if it's not a good culture fit, that's another whole scenario altogether. But if this person is a good culture fit, they may have very, very valid reasons or rationale that really does need to be heard, but it masquerades and it presents itself as being a little bit obstinate or being a little bit kind of averse, where really there's something that's niggling them. And if we really just listen, half the time, not always, but half the time, there is a message there for us as leaders. And wherever there's some resistance to anything, I always say pay attention, because the resistance is normally telling you something or sending you a signal that really needs to be listened to if we really want this to be true.
I can empathize with that one on a personal level. I can say, as a CEO and entrepreneur, I like change, and am risk adverse, right? So I've learned over the years and through different work kind of with personality profiles and things like that, to learn that the risk aversion can slow things down, but it can also be a risk mitigation, right? So pushing through, but paying attention to those kind of red flags or pink flags actually serves a purpose.
I think that that's probably your gift in being an entrepreneur, is being able to really look at the risk and to be able to assess it accurately, or as accurately as you can. I think that that's a great gifting, because many founders, CEOs have got what I call the enthusiastic visionary and just go for it. And that's helpful too. But to have some of that and then some of the risk mitigation with it, I think that that's a real gift.
Yeah, thank you. We all work with what we have, right? And ideally we're
Oh
learning
my
more
gosh.
about that each year.
Totally.
So, Anne, thank you for all of this information so far. You clearly have such a wealth of knowledge in this area. I'd love to talk a little bit more about kind of a change that you've driven in an organization. Can you talk about one of the bigger changes that you've been a part of?
It's such a good question, and I've actually been thinking about what I would deem as a great change, and then we always think about great change in, well, actually, I shouldn't say we. I always think about great change. It's like, where has it been big and at scale? And I've actually got two examples. One is big and at scale, and there was change. But then there is another which wasn't big in its scale. It was actually much smaller, but it really did send a ripple effect through the organization. So the first one is two big, I'm trying to look at FMCG, fast moving consumer good industries, two big players in the industry coming together. So it was PepsiCo and another organization called Pioneer, and they actually formed, PepsiCo acquired this company called Pioneer, which was no small company to start with. And so merging these two organizations into one organization probably was the biggest challenge we've at Lockstep have ever worked on. And it was tricky because PepsiCo, as you know, is a big organization, and Pioneer, who was being taken into PepsiCo, were really adamant that they didn't want to lose all of their legacy that they had. I mean, they were a really old company. Anyway, so we started doing this, and the thing that made it successful is that every single team that was part of this amalgamation or acquisition went on a teaming journey. And what that meant was there was a beginning, a middle, and an end. So there was the process, which we spoke on over process. But what went into that was we really were allowed to work with what I call emergence. So the beginning part was set. We had to tell people what we're doing. They were experimenting with how this would impact them. but we didn't know how anyone felt. And so the brief year was so wonderful because they gave us full license to say, this is the strategy, this is how we're doing it, this is our process. But to start with, we just want to settle teams. And one of our famous sayings is connection before content. And so just connecting people to get comfortable with each other and then to talk about the change. And I mean, big corporates, their goals are set. It doesn't matter just because we're now being acquired that these goals will shift and change and they'll become easier. So we really, I think what made that change successful was for the first piece of work, we were completely licensed to just work with the team and to meet them where they were at without actually it being goal driven. We knew where we wanted to get people, but just to say it's okay. So that I haven't gone into the methodologies, but that was the one that I thought was really great. And the second one, which is more with a founder-led company, I say a startup, but I'm talking about a startup that's been going for 8 years, that is well-funded, that is breaking industry norms in the crypto space. So no one to really copy from and scaling massively. In that instance, the change that they needed, they were trying to get past a whole lot of regulations, were stopping them, and they were scaling globally, but really wanting to hold on to culture and to move much faster than what they were. And in this organization, it was so interesting because the leaders actually stopped and said, we need to start committing to doing our work away from just the business. We are so confident in our competency. And they were happy to own that. They were saying, from a competency point of view, we know what we're doing. We're more worried about us as humans messing this up because of our impatience, because of our, they're all quite competitive achievers. So like burnout, go, not giving people a time to shape up. And their transformation was completely different. Before they went into process, they actually said, once a quarter, we are going to go and do deep work on ourselves. Now, as little as probably 3-4 years ago, that would be like, oh, you're going to go and take yourselves off for literally 4 to 5 days, once a quarter, all together as a team. Obviously, there's business was included in that for the first two days. But that's what they committed to. And they still have that ritual today. It's not as long. It's not 2 to 3 days, once a quarter, but they still do it. And the way they showed up in that business radically impacted change, radically, because all of a sudden they were seeing things in themselves and then they were spotting it in their organization. So they were able to break patterns, because that's exactly what a system is. It's patterns. And when you're transforming something, you're actually reshaping the patterns of something. You're saying, well, we've always gone that way. Now we're going to go this way, or we're going to shift a little bit to the left or to the right. So in forming those new patterns, if you can't spot them and break them, you're not going to get there. What are you going to do? You're going to over-process and over-engineer everything. And I really don't want to lose sight of the fact that there is a place for that has to be part of transformation. I'm not subscribing to the fact that, oh, we can all just go up and be fairies and think about how we need to grow and it's all just going to happen with emergence. That's not what I'm advocating for. There needs to be a rigorous process. There needs to be disciplines. There needs to be an understanding. But to be honest, that is the easier part. The human part is definitely the trickier part. That's if we've got the competencies and the right of tech and strategy planned.
Yeah, I could see that. As you're talking about this example, I think first off, it's impressive that they had that insight that they were likely to be kind of impatient, or that their competitiveness, while an advantage, can also disadvantage the process or the way the transformation would unfold. I'm wondering, if a CEO is thinking and saying like, yes, I could use some of that work on myself and my leadership team, how do they go about it? Are there any kind of tips or resources that you would share on that?
I think that there are two things. So most people will say, oh, you've got to get a coach. And I mean, I do coaching, and I think coaching is wonderful and very necessary if you want to do deep personal work. But what I think is the teaming aspect of like, what is this collective leadership team and what are our team goals? I would say really look at, if I'm talking to the CEO now particularly, look at your leadership team, because that is ultimately going to be your biggest leverage point to drive the change. Change will come from all sorts of places, but your leverage point really is your leadership team. So what I would say is start with shaping your leadership team into what you need, desire, and want. So that is where I'd start with the process. And what I mean by that is, how do we choose to be together? How are we going to team? What is our collective team goal that we are all committed to? How are we going to play? What does our team charter look like? I would always say start with the teaming aspect and bring in some of the individual pieces into that. I would say start, but actually transformation is, I don't want to sound too big yet, but often transformation, if it's real, defies conventional norms. That's really what transformation does in various ways, shapes, and forms. And if we're not willing to do that for ourselves, we can't really expect it from our business. So I would say first the teaming part with your actual team, make sure you've got the right team alongside you. Otherwise, it just becomes too big a burden, or too much rallying and what I call push energy, and that will run out of itself. And the second thing I would say is resolve your trauma, which I know sounds, or be prepared to even look at your trauma. And I know that sounds like a bit of a left field thing to say, but most transformation or most change in human beings can't happen because of our trauma. And I don't mean trauma, big capital T necessarily. I'm talking about the microaggressions, because normally how we are formed comes from our experiences, and those experiences happened to be like work. So often I'll work with a CEO who's about to do a wonderful, brave thing in his business, and he'll say something like, I will never be like my first boss, or I will never do it like the competitors do, or I will never, or I am absolutely adamant that it's got to happen in this way. And part of that is good, but that always is a signal for me to say, oh, there's something there. Either it's an attachment or a trauma or an inner vow that they've made. And so when we start looking at leaders and their own trauma and being able to know that we can work through that trauma, and I wish I could find another word for trauma, because I know everybody like automatically gets their own nervous system response when we say that. We actually start healing our organizations. We heal ourselves, we heal our organizations, and then guess what? Transformation is so much lighter because there's a lightness behind it. I think there's often such a heaviness around, we've got to transform and we're gonna do this, and we try and ignite people, but actually we're saying it with this like, this is our opportunity if we don't seize this now. And like that is actually quite fearful for people, where if we resolve our own trauma, we could be much lighter and be the light that we really need to be in our organizations without sacrificing on standards or any of the good business stuff that we really need. So that might be a little bit of different advice. And then obviously I would say the responsible advice is to really make sure that you've had someone else interrogate your strategy and the commercials around the transformation. I mean, I know that's an obvious thing to say, but it's amazing for me how we always seek out people that are going to affirm us, or we'll seek out people that will give us what we need. So just really making sure that that someone can really challenge you on your own thinking before you embark on it. And yeah, I'm actually I'm going to stop there. Those would be the first two places I would start. And actually no, I'm gonna add a third thing, and do the planning. Third thing is do the planning with your team. So once you've done the teaming piece, the trauma piece, I would actually do the planning of that with your team, and then take it to the second level. So start cascading it down a little bit and get more voices in the room is where I'd start before it goes to a town hall or before you even announce it.
Thank you, Anne. That is really good advice. Very, very actionable, and I think gives each of us things to be thinking about. I know for myself, thinking about kind of that, that baggage or what kind of raises the antenna is a good barometer, or listening for some of those strong phrases, like you said, I will never do this, or whatnot.
Right.
So, Anne, I'd love to switch gears a bit. We've learned a lot from you so far. I'd love to talk a little bit about you, right? So, who are you? What was your childhood like? Did you always know you were going to be in this line of work someday? Tell me how you got to where you are.
Oh, that's a great question, and I'll try and not go on for too long. So, who am I? And did I always know I'd be in business? I was always in sport. So I really always liked competing. So sport has been part of my life forever. And I was a competitive gymnast for years and years and years. And that taught me a lot of really great things. And it taught me a lot of things that I really needed to unlearn. But the competitive nature has always been there. And I grew up in a family of educators, but my dad actually used to always be an entrepreneur. So although he was an educator and he worked for what we call in South Africa the Department of Education and was really running that, he always had entrepreneurial businesses on the side, which we were always involved in some way, shape, and form. And then I remember as a 19-year-old, actually, no, I was 21 because I'd finished studying. And I went over to the UK and lived in the UK for some time. And I happened to stumble into a conference that was amazingly held in a church at the time, so I could go in for free. And I remember them talking about how to be in business. And there was something about what this guy was talking about that I thought, that's what I want to do. That is exactly what I want to do. I want to teach people how to be in business, but it kind of left me for a while. And then I went into the world of business and was in marketing and then in strategy. And I realized only now in hindsight that some way I was always really drawn to people and the people aspect of it until I started feeling like the biggest imposter. I was doing strategy work and I used to look out into the sea of boardroom faces. I used to call them boardroom faces, bored and in the boardroom. And I would be feeling like I've got this mammoth task of presenting this strategy. And it was one of those just kind of epiphany moments, which is so obvious when I now say it out loud. But the epiphany was, it's not the strategy. This is actually the easier part. It's how do we get people to move through the strategy in a way that is life-giving. And my belief really is that business is the world and that business needs to serve the world. And I don't like to put this into too many purpose words because I think people have misconstrued purpose to mean that that's just something we've got to do. And it's great because it's the purpose statement on the wall and it makes everyone feel happy. But I mean, really live our why and what that means. And given where the world is going, I think our places of work are now our places of community more than ever, where a whole bunch of people get to do very cool things together. So that's how I landed up here. But I think the educator part, my parents always had me curious about the world of work and people.
That's a great story, and sounds very fortunate that conference was available in a church that you could go right in.
Crazy.
You and I share that being raised by educators. My parents were both professors, and I think the business side and the competitive side was new to them and innate in me. But then that love of learning, the love of teaching others, I think I very much got from my upbringing.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Yeah. So, Anne, we're talking a lot about transformation. So now that we're talking about you, I'm wondering, are there any personal transformations that have impacted you professionally that you'd like to talk about?
Oh, so many. And I think I'll probably start with the biggest one, which is the most recent personal transformation, and one that I am still in the middle of. And that has been a cancer diagnosis that got handed to me 2 years ago. I was at my fittest, at my healthiest. And you won't believe it, Natalie, but in preparing for this podcast, you have given me the great fortune of putting another piece in the puzzle of this diagnosis. And I'm going to come back to that. But I was at a time in my career where I thought I really had it all figured out. I was flying, I was doing wonderfully well. And then this diagnosis hit. And all of a sudden, this transformational piece was so up in my face, because you can't teach everybody about transformation or about leadership or about performance and then have a blow dished out to you like this and not be willing to go on the journey yourself in all of its grief and in all of its pain. But what I have really, really learned is that there are so many new beginnings. And actually, for me, and this is the piece that you've really helped me with, my mantra, or going into that year that I was diagnosed, was I am ready. And actually, then I got handed this diagnosis in the September of the year, and I was like, this whole year has been a joke. I'm not ready. I'm so not ready. I've never been ready. And what I meant by ready was ready for the next big thing, ready to take my life on. And then I got this diagnosis. But actually, what I've realized is I was ready. And what I was ready for was actually to feel like a failure. I mean, of course I wasn't, but I felt like that. I felt like I'd failed myself. What have I done wrong? But you have to have some kind of a readiness to know that failure happens to everybody. And I don't see myself as a failure. So anyone that's listening to this go, hey, you can't say that. I'm not saying that I'm a failure, but what I'm saying is I needed to go a little bit down before I could come back up. And the cancer diagnosis, the initial kind of year of that diagnosis, was my moving what I would call to my bottoming out. And it was a really beautiful thing, because it's helped me to go, what does the world really need from me? And what am I able to give responsibly? And where do I need to be more responsible for myself? And I can't say it's been, because I'm not done and I'm still in this diagnosis, but it has given me fresh eyes just to see the world in a completely new way. And that has impacted my work massively, in ways that I'm still computing. The one thing it has transformed in me is that I feel much braver, because I think we have many deaths, as do organizations, as do businesses. We kind of die into that version and a new version comes. And I feel like I'm living that right now. And I'm doing that alongside people and alongside business. So for the first time in a long time, I'm like right in there with everybody. I'm not separate or kind of preaching from an ivory tower because I've got it sorted out. I don't. I am, I'm in it with everybody else.
Yeah, yeah. Well, your bravery and strength are amazing, and I think too the parallels of how you've turned kind of what you do and know professionally to how does that apply to yourself and showing up the way that you need to, right, in a situation like that, is just really impressive that you've been able to do that. And I think coming out feeling braver is a wonderful, wonderful byproduct.
You know, it is so freeing. It is so freeing to be able to like really look at yourself on the better days, and then really to be brave. So thank you.
Yeah, yeah. I think of, resilience, and it's something that there are, frameworks and approaches to build it, but really I think the best resilience is going through difficult things, realizing that you can get through them, and then the next time you're that much stronger for it and you have that much more like trust and confidence in yourself.
Absolutely. What I will add to that is, with that bravery and sticking with the theme of transformation, has also been compassion. I've got a lot of kindness, but I don't have much compassion. I've got a lot of what I call push energy. So go, 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 do, no time to waste. Please do it according to the standard that it's meant to be done. And I haven't had much compassion for myself in that process. And I'm really learning how to have compassion and then extending that to people in a way that still, you can see how I'm protecting the standards here, and still doesn't let anyone off the hook of what it is we're trying to do here, but just to do it a little more compassionately. And that, to link back to what I was saying earlier on, has made any transformation feel a lot lighter. Even my own journey of going through cancer, it's felt like, well, there are days that it's very heavy, but there are many days where it's actually quite light and we can have a laugh at what's gone wrong and we'll try again tomorrow. And it's just ushered in this remarkable compassion, but still doing the right disciplines in order to get better.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I think while we're talking about, your introspections, I have another introspective question for you. As you think about, your leadership responsibilities over the years, do you have any advice that you would give your younger self in your first ever leadership role, knowing what you know now?
Oh, that's a spicy question. I think I would say to speak, even if your voice is shaky. And in my younger self, I would feel like that's not a fully baked idea just yet. So don't say anything, or don't give your opinion because it may not be valid yet. And if I could do it again, I would express myself much more authentically and much more genuinely. Even if it was wrong, I would actually care less about whether it was right or wrong, but I would care more about what I really thought. And I would really just say, speak, even if your voice is shaky, because once it's out, it just becomes much easier. And that's just a way to grow in confidence, is the one thing. And the other thing I would say is, let's please have fun while we do this. Is real advice I'd give my younger self, is just to really enjoy and embrace the ride. We're doing amazing things in the world of business, and we forget that sometimes. I think we make our job small, and it's just a job that pays the bill, and that's no way to live. So I would say, like take your job seriously but lightly, carry it lightly.
Thank you for those. Those are both great. And I know I can say I would have benefited from hearing those as well. So we can pass
Yeah.
that wisdom on and pay it forward.
Should I put you on the spot and ask you what you'd say to yourself?
Well, I actually do think that point about speaking up is an important one. I think remembering that the best laid plans will never go quite as intended. And so you were talking about this a little bit earlier in the conversation, but I'm naturally a planner. I like things to go according to how they were set forth, and have learned the need to ebb and flow with the business, with the team, be open to new ideas coming from anywhere, listening to the outside world and bringing that in. I think those are things that have
I
come with
love
time.
that. Yeah, I love that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And before we wrap up, can you let our listeners know where they can find you?
Yeah, I'd love to engage and have conversations with anyone that enjoys transformation or some different kind of thinking. And I can be found on our website. It's www.lockstep.global. Or you can find me on LinkedIn, Anne Hartslief, HARTS for sugar, LIEF, and that means heart love in South Africa. And on Instagram, I'm at Anne Hartslief. Or you could email me, Anne at lockstep.global. Either of those.
Wonderful. And we can also add those to the show notes if people want to get in touch.
That'd be great.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This has been such a great conversation.
Thank you, Natalie, and just thank you for the work you're doing in the world. I know that you walk the talk, and you are a dynamic businesswoman. So thank you for bringing this to the world and for birthing it.
Thank you. Thank you, Anne. And thank you to everyone listening. I know I really loved hearing about so much of what Anne had to share, and the frameworks and advice that she had, the work that CEOs need to do internally on themselves and with their team. So if you learned something today, and I'm pretty sure that you did, please tell someone about this episode. Sharing these types of insights and information with one another is really how we all get better for each of us as leaders and to help our companies be successful. So thanks again, Anne. And this has been another fantastic episode of Shift and Thrive. See you all next week. That's a wrap for this week's episode. For show notes and more, visit shiftandthrivepodcast.com. A special thank you to our sponsor, Magnitude Consulting, bringing you the thinking power of a growth consultancy and the getting it done power of a full-service marketing agency to help B2B companies fuel their growth. For more information on Magnitude and to get your complimentary transformation readiness assessment, visit magnitudeconsulting.com/getready. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next week.